Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're going to recap this week in cannabis news from April 5th to the 11th. So before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learned something, please just leave a like on it, as it really helps out my channel. And then, of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so you don't miss any future videos. And then there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with so that you can take advantage. Now, we're going to start with some projections. The Marijuana Business Fact Book, brought to you by Marijuana Business Daily, has been published, and it projects nearly $45 billion for the U.S. market by 2025. Now, this is their high-end projection, their low-end being $38.4 billion. But with this infograph, based on all the data reported from 2020, it really puts things into perspective, just how big this industry is going to be when you consider that number 4 behind it is the legal recreational and cannabis market of 2020 already. So second in line, you have craft beer. Third, you have the global opioids market, which you know cannabis is going to be taking a lot of share from this, and big pharma companies don't like that. After that, though, you've got the NFL, you've got the Purdue Pharma opioid settlement, what they had to pay in damages for the harms that they caused, the police budget in New York City, hard seltzer, even over-the-counter first aid, and over-the-counter sleep aids, which again, cannabis is going to eat into that because sleep is one of the things that it really helps with. So, main thing, this is just awesome to see. If we go through it, this is what they are projecting. Now, again, these are projections. We obviously don't know what the future will hold, but based on the amount of sales that they've seen and the amount of growth, this seems quite fair. And so the U.S. adult use and medical cannabis sales in 2021 already, so this is just this current year that we're in, are expected to hit $22 billion to $26.4 billion compared to last year, 2020, which was 17.5. So this is very strong, consistent growth. So if you are interested in getting the Marijuana Business Daily Fact Book, you can click the link here, and basically it will tell you some of their findings and just give you all of the information. So I believe it's about $200, but if you think about it as an educational tool to learn and invest with, obviously you can just use my channel and come back here every week or for every video, but that's the purpose of it, using it so that you can find the right investments, and obviously if you make the right choices, it's a great return on investment. The 9th annual fact book includes key findings like 100% of investors expect the industry to do better in 2021 than in 2020. Seems pretty obvious. The cannabis industry will offer more than 400,000 full-time jobs in 2021. So this, I imagine, will add on to the 321,000 that they had in 2020. And I saw another, I think I've previously reported this, but by 2022, it's expected to be over 500,000. And an adult use market in New York, the country's financial hub, is expected to launch next year and reach annual sales of $2.5 billion by year 5. So again, long term, this is far out, but these numbers are very solid, and as an investor that holds long term, you definitely like to see that. So now, sales of cannabis products continue to grow in the first quarter as some categories performed better than others. Now, just want to point out that this data is from Headset, so it only covers from Colorado out west. For the most part, these are California, Colorado, Nevada, Oregon, and Washington. So these are the most mature markets, and these are also markets that have more ma and pa cannabis businesses, as opposed to these larger MSOs that are really more expanding, or that have been expanding into Illinois, Florida, these eastern states. So it's just something I didn't consider before, but realizing that a lot of the mature markets already have a lot of their companies established in it, and obviously these MSOs are trying to get into there, but obviously, the country's very big, right? So there's so much potential still. But adult use cannabis categories continued to grow in the first quarter of 2021 when compared to the same period last year, with some categories doing better than others since the previous quarter. And the main growth they saw were in beverages, capsules, edibles. The least amount of growth were in vape pens, pre-rolls, flower. Mind you, this is good. What this tells me is that people want to try new products, and that's going to be a sign for these companies to continue innovating and find interesting ways to use cannabis ingredients and compounds, to drive more sales. But so yeah, sales seem strong. Again, retail sales are collected for just California, Colorado, Nevada, Oregon, and Washington. And just to point out, because whenever I've looked at Headset before, I've been trying to find some of the MSOs brands and see where they're at, but that's the main thing. It just focuses on what's on the West Coast, and again, there's many more states to be accounted for. But the data showed lackluster sales performances for vapes, pre-rolls, and flowers. Now, that sounds bad, but let me get into the details and show you why that's not bad at all. The beverage category continued to shine in the first quarter, leading all categories in sales growth, with 68.4% over the same period last year and 14.2% versus the fourth quarter of 2020. And most beverage categories experienced double-digit growth going into 2021 in all states, where you had tea, coffee, and hot cocoa up 16%, carbonated beverages up 14%, water with, I guess, some of the compounds, and then drops, mixes, elixirs, and syrups at 11.4%. Now, as it says, vape pre-roll category showed the least growth, with flower actually posting a decline for the recent quarter, not the whole year, while flower sales grew 32.4% over the first quarter last year. So year over year, it's still 32.4%, which is huge. They declined almost 1% versus the fourth quarter of 2020. But on the positive side, flower small drop flattens a downward trend for the category. The flower sales declined 12% in the fourth quarter after spectacular gains of 32% in the second quarter of 2020 and 15% in the third quarter that were driven largely by the pandemic. So the idea, I think, though, is that more people are starting to buy cannabis. They're getting interested. They probably start with flower, but a lot of them are getting into beverages and these new things. But here's where it's just good to point out. It would be premature to call flower a loser as it continues to grow year over year and still commands the largest share of market. Get this. For comparisons, beverage sales for the states analyzed were 31.3 million in the first quarter of 2021, while flower sales totaled 1.1 billion. So it's not even close. Flower still dominating without a doubt. And if you want to find out more, it does have all the percentages down here, so you can find the link below in the description. So just pointing that out, although the flower sales dropped by 1% in the quarter, still 1.1 billion compared to 31 million. So people are buying flower. Don't you get worried. Now, New York will impact the global cannabis market like no other region. Absolutely. And the more we hear about this, and as New York is an epicenter of culture, the more excited I get, really. So why does this matter? Even as cannabis is still simultaneously illegal at the federal level and only somewhat legal in 42 states, New York's unique global identity and mix of industries will enable changes in perception and business operations, experts say. It is driving the news and the awareness and helping change the narrative, which we want. New York is one of the 16 states that have passed legislation to legalize recreational use, with many aspects of the law taking effect immediately. How it works: retail cannabis sales are expected to begin in 2022, but smoking cannabis in public is now permitted wherever smoking tobacco is allowed locally, and adults can possess up to 3 ounces for recreational use. There is currently around 3 dozen cannabis dispensaries statewide for medical cannabis, and going forward, 2 new agencies will create and implement new regulations and licenses. And the governor's office expects the industry to create 30,000 to 60,000 jobs and collect $350 million in tax revenue. So what are they saying? New York is one of the most visited destinations in the world, so the state can play cultural cannabis ambassador that no other jurisdiction has played to date. And besides California, which it already has, New York, just on the other side of the country, will do the exact same thing, says John Kegia, and probably in a different way. People that love fashion, people that love theater, arts, this is really big, says John Kegia, Chief Knowledge Officer of New Frontier Data, a cannabis market research firm. And just want to point this out. This is a personal anecdote, but when I taught in Korea and in Vietnam, I remember my co-teachers, females, one of their dreams, and every single one of them, they wanted to visit New York City at one point in their life. So when you bring people from, that aren't aware of cannabis, it's just one way to spread awareness and help change the narrative. And surprisingly, it does reach out, and it will reach out globally, which is awesome to consider and think about. So what to expect what to watch, expect an East Coast domino effect. Governor Ned Lamont and Daniel McKee of respective neighbors Connecticut and Rhode Island are eager to align, while New Hampshire's does not. So hey, still some states are slow to change, but the dominoes are falling elsewhere, as Virginia, starting July 1st, will be the first southern state to allow adult use, and Pennsylvania is a regional holdout as the state's Republican-controlled legislature resists the governor's call for change. Now, in the long run, New York may aid the East Coast in becoming a bigger market with more lobbying power, but the West Coast, Washington, Oregon, and California wins on price thanks to supply gluts and unlimited licenses. But when Wall Street sees how the market develops on its own block, there are some expectations that financial players will want the SAFE Banking Act passed so they can work with cannabis clients without federal penalties. And we already know that this is underway. Patience will reward us, so just remember, be patient, that will come. And politics is all about pulling strings, and we at least do have a cannabis-friendly Senate Majority Leader working on that for us. By the numbers, with approximately 28 million people of age, California is the largest legal market, nearly twice the size of New York. But New York is still expected to generate $3.7 billion in sales by 2025, which is about half of what California is expected to generate that year, says New Frontier Data, but still. We're progressing in the right direction. The bigger picture, as much excitement as there is for the economic benefit of an expanded cannabis industry, New York's passage also demonstrates the social need for legalization and decriminalization. which it absolutely does, as Black and Hispanic people are still arrested at higher rates for possession. And hopefully this helps address that issue, and it'll save police time and money from arresting people that they have no reason, there's no business doing. It just wastes, again, time, money, and resources. Opponents of broader legalization argue that increased use will lead to more incidents of impaired driving, and that approving the bill sends a message to children that cannabis is harmless, fund endorsed by the state. Actually, parents that don't look at the data and then just try to tell their kids what's real based on listening to what they've heard and not actually check for themselves, that's sending more of a message to the kids that, what they say is not true. And a lot of what they present, is not based on factual evidence. And I've presented many times in past videos how we have the data and it does not affect impaired driving, or impaired driving goes down. And just, I'm 28 now, but I was a kid. And when I was getting messages from my parents that clearly just came from what they heard on TV and wasn't based on factual evidence that I could look up on the internet, that sent a worse message. So just pointing that out, just accept the new reality that we've learned, and it'll help us get through this faster. But the bottom line, there has never been a greater likelihood of public support in the U.S. for the legalization of cannabis, according to Gallup. As one of the most populated and influential states in the country and a financial center of the world, New York will have an outsized impact on the shape of the cannabis industry. Absolutely. Now, Todd Harrison has brought us some more up-to-date information from Needham, another investment firm, multi-state operator, quarterly recap for Q4 of 2020. So, regardless of what you're seeing with share prices day to day, 2020 was an outstanding year for MSOs and industry development, with the top 10 MSOs growing revenue by an average of 140%. So this is what you want to pay attention to, the facts and the fundamentals on the ground. For the larger MSOs, a sufficient operating base has been established to evaluate the quality of the business models, and as an overreaching statement on the group, 2020 results affirm that these are very good businesses. Limited capital markets access from mid-19 to late 2020, and unfounded fear of a demand shock as the pandemic began in March 2020 required that limited capital be deployed to only the highest return projects and enforce discipline in keeping the operating structures tight. So of course, as there was a lot of uncertainty, investors and sources of capital wanted to restrict that because they don't want to increase their risk. Now, as industry growth accelerated in 2020 and the revenue generative asset base for MSOs grew, the operating leverage in the model was exceptionally high. So this resulted in substantial improvements in margin rate, margin dollars, and cash flow, and access to capital this year, as we've seen already. We expect the U.S. cannabis industry to grow 20 to 25% in 2021, but expect MSO revenues to grow 90% plus, for gross margin to be sustained at 55%, or for EBITDA profitability rate to be at 30%. These metrics would be exceptional at any industry, but are extraordinary for any sub-industry in a consumer space. While the cost of capital remains high for MSOs because of the safe banking has yet to pass, because of those regulations, and because cannabis is treated differently, the $1.7 billion in secondary equity issuance and $500 million in debt raised among the larger MSOs in the last 6 months has substantially improved balance sheets, which will fund higher levels of CapEx spending and kick off a wave of M&As as MSOs seek to expand into the new states or add to scale in existing ones, we believe. We don't expect 2021 quarterly results to exhibit the consistency in operating improvement and high rates of operating leverage experienced by the group in 2020. M&A integration and higher levels of G&A spend will likely make the quarterly improvement a little more choppy, but with the continued top-line growth we expect to see in 2021, we view the fundamental setup as very strong. And I think it's fair to point out that although these industries have been growing steadily, their numbers are solid and will continue to grow, but the main thing this year I think that we're looking for catalysts does not have to do with their numbers. These are solid. We're waiting on the legislative changes which will come through cannabis reform and the safe banking. So that's really what 2021 is going to promise us, I think. So let's jump over to the states. What legislative changes has happened? Well, the South is making some moves. Virginia legalizes cannabis. The law will take effect on July 1st. So on April 7th, 2020, the Virginia General Assembly voted to approve the amendments proposed by Governor Ralph Northam and will make adult use cannabis legalization bill, or make the bill take effect on July 1st, 2021 instead of 2024, which makes Virginia the first state in the South and the 17th state in the nation to legalize cannabis for adults. Congratulations, Virginia. This is amazing. Now, with Virginia moving forward, state Democratic leaders in North Carolina to be next to legalize cannabis. So just point out again that this is Democratic leaders, so as it is politics, you have to pull strings of both sides to bring them together. However, with Virginia moving forward, some Democrats in North Carolina are pushing for North Carolina to be next. A bill filed this week in the Senate would legalize it for medical purposes, while another bill would fully legalize it, including recreational. Bills use medical use of cannabis should be a top priority, but it was important for me to also look at the beginning of conversations around legalizing the recreational use of cannabis because so many other states are moving on this, said Senator Jay Chaudhuri, one of the primary sponsors of the bill to legalize. The issue ultimately is about restorative justice, and I just wanted to point out here, this was from Senator Natalie Murdoch. I think you'll see the same with cannabis. You'll see folks that will go to Virginia, and why should they get all those tax benefits and leave our state without getting the tax benefits, right? So the leverage of when states legalize, states around them now notice that they can use this as leverage to create an argument, and like, this is why we need to legalize it too, so that we don't lose the tax revenue. And we've seen that in Illinois, so it's a great point. Now, after North Carolina, South Carolina senator threatens to block every single other bill if medical cannabis doesn't get the vote. So, unfortunately, no word of adult use legalization anytime soon in South Carolina, but if other South Carolina senators move to block a bill to legalize medical cannabis, its sponsor said on Tuesday that he would use his power to stop every other piece of legislation on the chamber's calendar in protest. We're going to get this bill passed, said Senator Tom Davis, who filed the South Carolina Compassionate Care Act, also a Republican, so worth noting, said at a press conference with supporters, and if there are some up on the Senate floor that are still in the reefer madness, drug war mentality, and block and stand in the way of this bill, I will exercise my rights as a senator to respond in kind to every single other bill on this calendar. That is a huge flex, and again, I've said this many times, but this is individuals taking a stand based on new evidence and facts that we have, and that's what helps drive change. Obviously, discussions have to be held, but great to see that out of South Carolina as well. And then another state in the South, Georgia, 30 medical cannabis oil dispensaries could open in Georgia. Under this new bill that was passed by the General Assembly. So the legislation would set a limit on the number of dispensaries for the first time as companies prepare to begin producing medical cannabis oil in Georgia. This was what I found super interesting, though. The bill would bring Georgia one step closer to providing a legal way for 15,000 registered patients to buy medicine that they're allowed to consume. But get this, state law has permitted use of the medical cannabis oil since 2015, but it's remained against the law to purchase it. So how do you get it, right? It's just, so when you notice this in law, this is where it helps for people to point it out, call it out, and then that's how the people in power can make change to that. And so it appears that the bill was one of the latest approved by the General Assembly before it adjourned March 31st, and the state government plans to soon award licenses to 6 companies to grow and manufacture medical cannabis oil, which can have no more than 5% THC, the compound that gives cannabis users a lot of the therapeutic benefits. Those companies will then have 1 year to begin. Now, again, they want to use that term, give users a high, and yes, what the high does is provide a lot of therapeutic benefits. I can't wait for us to find out what those actually are when we do more research. But under the legislation, each of these companies would be allowed to open 5 dispensaries, providing more patients suffering from conditions like seizures, terminal cancers, and Parkinson's disease. So this is opportunity for MSOs to get into Georgia, which I thought was awesome. Now, to cover Montana, they did vote to legalize on the ballot in November, but the Montana House advances 3 Republican bills to implement adult-use cannabis. However, Democrats disagreed with the bill as they said they made too many changes to the original voter-approved measure, which does seem fair to argue. Now, the House did advance the bill, and this is based off of what was voted, so I just wanted to highlight this, though, because although we don't have any developments yet, the awareness is key, and according to the Associated Press, the voter-approved measure would allow for cannabis sales to begin January 2022. So if no other states make the changes, Montana will be the 18th state to do that in January. So that's exciting. And last but not least, with the biggest population down south, Texas lawmakers tackle cannabis decriminalization, medical cannabis, and hemp in committee hearings. Now, there's still no word in Texas about creating a legal, regulated and taxed market, which I think would be a huge benefit. Mind you, reform in small steps is still better than none at all. Cannabis reform is the hot topic in the Texas legislature this week, with lawmakers holding hearings on multiple cannabis decriminalization bills, a proposal to expand the state's medical cannabis program, and another piece of legislation concerning hemp regulations. So the bills were separately scheduled for discussions in 3 House committees throughout the week. So it's not like it's throughout the month or throughout the session, it's throughout this week, which is good, raising hopes for advocates that lawmakers may still advance cannabis reform this year, despite setbacks from from the pandemic and the state's ice storm, which is obviously was a destructive force that no one anticipated either, but Nonetheless, awareness and more buzz is great for the cannabis industry overall. So Curaleaf, let's jump into MSOs. Curaleaf completes acquisition of EMAC in Europe. So this puts, I think, Curaleaf second behind Tilfria in a European footprint going forward, and secures $130 million investment from single strategic institutional investor. So as we can see down here, to accelerate the expansion of Curaleaf International, I wanted to go through this line first. So they closed that deal, which is set in stone now. They're buying EMAC, but Curaleaf has simultaneously established Curaleaf International Holdings in Guernsey to hold EMAC investment and further its European expansion. So this dilution does not affect Curaleaf investors in the US, which is a great thing, I think, for investors who already own the share to know, because of course expansion does cost money and does bring a bit of dilution, but they are strategizing for European expansion. To accelerate this expansion of Curaleaf International, Curaleaf has secured an investment of $130 million from a single strategic institutional investor in exchange for 31.5% equity stake in Curaleaf International, implying a $413 million post-money valuation with $80 million in cash available to spend. I wonder when this IPO is going to come about. I'll try to keep you posted if I find any news. The subscription will fund the entire cash portion of the EMAC acquisition, consideration of $50 million, with the remaining $80 million to be used to fund Curaleaf International's current capital expenditures plan through 2022, as well as its pipeline of potential acquisitions. And so Boris Johnson just noted that the successful completion of our acquisition of EMAC and the formation of our new Curaleaf International business marks a transformational launching point for our entrance into the European cannabis market. Building on our market-leading positions in the US, this transaction establishes Curaleaf as a global peer play, I would say, cannabis market leader by revenue and geographic reach. And with our single strategic institutional investor, again, one person with a lot of money willing to fund this, despite the fact that they don't have safe harbor language yet, clearly they see an opportunity here. We have set strong foundation for Curaleaf's international future growth trajectory. So on top of that, they have expanded 2 new retail locations in Massachusetts, giving them, I believe it says here, their 11th and 12th locations, not Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, my apologies, giving them their 11th and 12th locations in Pennsylvania. As a vertically integrated cannabis operator known for its quality, expertise, and reliability, Curaleaf is the largest national brand, now with 104 locations across 23 states. So let's jump over to see what Trulieve's been doing. And this is an amazing thing I saw in April. Attention, Bonita Springs. The first 420 expungement clinic is happening this Saturday at the Wellness Festival in the park. Please see below. This is how you retain customers and how you build brand. What's included? Well, so one of our attorneys at the expungement clinics will look at your records and see if you're eligible for a sealing or expungement of your record. Please bring your driver's license and any case information. What's included? Fingerprints, legal fees, and court costs. Do you see any other businesses doing this? Any big pharma, any alcohol, any tobacco? No. So this is why I love, what cannabis stands for. Personal freedoms and actually to set the precedent that companies can do this, especially if they're doing well and they're making enough money. They can help drive change in the community, which you love to see. And then we jump over to GreenThumb, which receives incentives to build New York cannabis facility at a former federal prison. So where they might have locked up a lot of people for moving cannabis illegally or for possessing cannabis, probably not a prison for small possession, but regardless, they're gentrifying old unused buildings into a purposeful cultivation and manufacturing facility. So the Orange County, New York Industrial Development Agency said Wednesday it has approved local financial incentives for cannabis company GreenThumb Industries to build a cannabis cultivation and manufacturing facility. GreenThumb plans to buy the remaining 8 lots, covering around 40 acres at the Warwick Valley office and technology corporate park, to construct a state-of-the-art cultivation and manufacturing facility. With the new manufacturing operations, the multi-state operator plans to hire 125 full-time employees and full benefits. Get your jobs, folks, if you're in New York. And the incentives approved by the agency includes sales and use tax exemption, mortgage recording tax exemption, a 15-year property tax abatement, and the issuance of taxable revenue bonds, per the report. And so obviously GreenThumb is thrilled, Orange County is thrilled, and I just wanted to point out that, in school you don't learn, we get taught to become employees and get a job where we're paying tax, but you don't learn that when you start businesses yourself and you provide the jobs and you provide the opportunities, that yes, governments and agencies provide incentives in order for you to do that. So it's just something that I've learned over time studying businesses and whatnot, and something you're not going to necessarily learn in school unless you get into business, right? So just to point out that Canopy Growth will acquire Supreme, we now have a price for $435 million in stock. And main thing I wanted to point out of this was that they are paying a 66% premium based on the closing price of Supreme Cannabis shares on April 7th. So what this means is that Supreme Cannabis was valued at a much lower valuation than $435 million as of April 7th. But for Canopy to buy them, they're willing to pay more goodwill and put a 66% premium. So they're adding 66% of value that didn't exist on Supreme based on, like, Canopy judges that value, puts it into this purchase, and that is what makes up this $435 million in stock. So just for that point being is that mergers and acquisitions in this industry, which we'll likely see in the US as well, will include premiums. So if you do own, for example, Supreme Cannabis, I haven't looked into them because they're Canadian. Again, one of the many companies that hit all-time highs and has never gotten back up there. But mergers and acquisitions does offer the opportunity for a smaller cap company that you've invested in to get bought out at a premium and a higher price, and you can see the share price increase for that reason. So just wanted to highlight that. It's nice that they've shared how much they've spent on it. And they've spent $435 really just to get Canada's leading premium brand 7 Acres. And so, interesting. They've spent a lot of money growing weed, and what they're doing now, spending more money to buy more weed from other people, hopefully getting a return on investment. Now, let's jump for a bit of a world tour. Report forecasts rapid growth for recreational cannabis market in Canada. Brightfield Group projects cannabis sales increasing to more than $4.1 billion in 2021. Now, in 2019, Canada's sales hit $1.2 billion. In 2020, they hit $2.6. So this is a decent trajectory in growth. And so this is reported from Brightfield. To explain, this represents a 60% increase over $2.6 billion, which Canada did in recreational sales in 2020. And additionally, the group report anticipates sales to continue rising over the next 5 years following 2021. So the growth won't be as big, but research firm report states that the market for cannabis flower will grow at a 16.6% compounded annual growth rate from 2020 to 2026. So this again comes on news as well from Ontario opening more stores. Hopefully Quebec, our second most populated province, will do the same. But more stores, more access to legal cannabis helps take money out of the black market and into the legal one, states' hands and investors' hands. Now, key insights from the European Cannabis Report. This is from Prohibition Partners. We're just going to jump through this part down here. Of course, you can find the link below if you want to read more into it, but as detailed in the latest European Cannabis Report, 2020 was a significant year for medical cannabis in Europe in terms of patient access and regulatory and commercial progress. Despite the delays caused by COVID-19, the Prohibition Partners estimate that 60,000 patients accessed medical cannabis on the continent for the first time during the year, bringing the total number of active patients to 185,000. This is, mind you, like half the amount of what medical patients registered in Florida. Or no, not even. It's like one third or 1/4, because I think they're up to over 500,000 registered. So just think about that. So Prohibition Partners estimate that the European cannabis market will be worth 403 million euros by the end of 2021 and will grow at a compounded annual growth rate, CAGR, of 67.4% from 2021 to reach 3.2 billion euros by 2025. By the end of this forecast period, we expect several nations to introduce legal access to adult use cannabis, including the Netherlands, Switzerland, Germany, and others. These sales could be worth over 500 million euros by 2025. And then this is my favorite part, though. As an Aphria shareholder, Germany will constitute over half of the European market until 2024. Until 2024, Germany's got half of that and will be worth over 840 million euro by the end of that forecast period. By 2025, large countries like France and the UK will have developed their patient access considerably and will represent a significant share in the European market. So it seems as what this says here and what we know previously, the best advantage you can get into Europe will be eventually investing into EMAC Life Sciences when Curaleaf ends up potentially turning that into a public company that you can invest in. But then, of course, Aphria and Tilray, which will merge quite soon. But then I do believe Aurora Cannabis also does have 5 slots. In Germany, Demacan has 3 slots. Mind you, you don't necessarily want to invest in a company based on the potential. You also want to make sure that their management is good and that everything else is going well. I just want to point that out as someone that has seen the worst of the Canadian cannabis industry, and sadly, Aurora did not really reward investors. But again, that was in the past. Could change in the future. Cannabis legalization is extremely popular in France. And as we move over to France, when it comes to cannabis consumption in Europe, France stands above the rest apparently. According to the UN, France has the highest rate of cannabis consumption among the list of European countries, over double the European average. With that in mind, it's unfortunate that France is not leading the charge when it comes to reforming Europe's harmful cannabis laws. Nations like Netherlands, Luxembourg, and Italy are likely to take the charge to legalize adult use beforehand. Mind you, it is good that France has started their pilot program for medical, and they did recently launch this poll with over 250 people in France responding. And the results showed a whopping 80% plus of respondents indicated that they support cannabis legalization within a legal framework, and less than 6% said that they didn't. So that is big. Again, this awareness is very important, and when you actually get word from the people, that's how you can bring change, from actually understanding what the market wants. And out of Ukraine legalizes certain types of medical cannabis products. One of my favorite things of this article is just to see that people in Ukraine are out protesting as well, because that is what drives change, when the market and the people speak up. Ukraine partly legalized the use of cannabis products for medical purposes on April 7th. The cabinet ministers made legal use of dronabinol and nobiline, which are synthetic cannabis-like chemicals, and nabiximols and nabiximols, a cannabis extract. Now, unfortunately, this does not mean that they've actually legalized the plant in any form whatsoever. These are sadly produced synthetically to imitate the effects of THC. So ideally, it would be better to just, give the real THC in the real plant a shot. Mind you, dronabinol treats loss of appetite that causes weight loss in AIDS patients, as well as vomiting and nausea during chemotherapy. It is legal in the US, Australia, and Germany, among other countries, and nabilone is also primarily used to treat nausea caused by chemotherapy and is legal in Canada, the US, and UK, and other countries. I wonder what side effects that these actually come with. Mind you, main thing is it's the first small step towards hopefully, making the plant get its time to shine in Ukraine. And then just wanted to point out MJStocktrader.com, an amazing resource, does have cannabis earnings listed as well. And we do have Aphria releasing their earnings tomorrow on Monday, so look out for that. Very exciting, and we will see whether they have increased their numbers. We will likely see Sweetwater numbers in there for the first time as well. And then apparently after that, we've got Organigram, The Valence Company, Tilt Holdings, Jushi on April 29th, Red, White, and Bloom, Hollister Biosciences, GreenThumb already set to go for May 12th, so hopefully some other MSOs follow. Canopy is expected to do their I'm not sure if it's Q3 for them, what quarter it is, but June 1st is estimated. And so look out for some news on Monday. I'll definitely be covering that. I might do an extra video on Tuesday just to cover the Aphria earnings. And lastly, just wanted to show you this article, which is without a doubt going to be the case. Could cannabis become the job creator of the century? I love this headline up here. Cannabis saves America's middle class. Yes. So, for anyone that is still stuck and holding on to their old view of things and don't want to change, the best thing you can do is just try to educate yourself and embrace this, because I don't think anything is going to change this. And the more we learn, the more accepted it's going to become. Mind you, I'm not going to go through this article. It's below if you want to read it, but I did find it was very interesting and is definitely foreshadowing what we can expect in the future. So let me know in the discussion or in the comments, folks, if I missed anything or what you're expecting tomorrow out of Aphria's earnings. I'm quite excited to see that, so I will be back with a video on Tuesday or maybe even Monday to recap that. But that is it for today's episode, folks. So if you enjoyed this, please leave a like on it, subscribe if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I will see you tomorrow or Tuesday with Aphria's earnings, and then back on Wednesday for a midweek cannabis news update. Have a great day, everybody.